Some people carry their emotions quietly, not because they are empty, but because they are full. Their inner world is loud, layered, constantly moving. Yet on the surface they appear calm, functional, ordinary. They listen more than they speak. They feel deeply but rarely announce it. Pain passes through them without spectacle. Joy, too, is often softened before it reaches the outside world. This silence is not weakness. It is not numbness. It is a form of containment, a way of surviving in a world that rarely knows how to sit with depth. These individuals feel everything: tone shifts, pauses, unspoken meanings. But they learned early that expressing too much can cost connection. So they learned to feel quietly. And over time, silence became both their refuge and their burden. There is a particular kind of person who notices everything, yet says very little. They feel the shift in a room before words change. They sense disappointment hidden behind politeness. They register the emotional temperature of conversations most people consider ordinary. Their nervous system is tuned finely, like a string pulled just tight enough to vibrate at the smallest touch. From the outside they appear calm, sometimes even distant. But internally, their world is dense with feeling, thoughts layered over emotions, emotions layered over memories, memories layered over meaning. Nothing arrives alone. Every experience echoes. This is not emotional excess. It is emotional depth. People who feel too much in silence are often misunderstood because society associates emotion with expression. Loudness becomes proof. Tears, anger, enthusiasm, these are visible signals. But some nervous systems process emotion inwardly, not outwardly. Feeling happens in private. Meaning is constructed slowly. Expression is delayed or filtered. Silence in this case is not emptiness. It is compression. These individuals often grow into careful observers. They listen more than they speak, not because they have nothing to add, but because they are still processing what has already been said. Their minds do not rush toward reaction. They absorb first. They weigh tone, context, intention. Words are treated as something delicate, something that can either clarify or wound. So they choose them carefully. Sometimes too carefully. Early on, many of them notice that their emotional responses are stronger than those around them. A small comment lingers. A subtle rejection hurts more than expected. A moment of kindness can stay vivid for days. This contrast creates confusion. Why does something minor feel so significant? Why does it take so long to settle? Without explanation, sensitivity begins to feel like a flaw. So silence forms, not as a decision but as an adjustment. A way to stay connected without overwhelming others. A way to remain present without becoming exposed. Over time, this adjustment becomes an identity. The calm one, the composed one, the one who handles things well. But handling is not the same as not feeling. Inside, emotions still move fully through the body. They just do it quietly. Sadness becomes heaviness in the chest that no one notices. Anxiety turns into constant alertness disguised as responsibility. Joy is felt deeply but shared lightly, as if too much of it might feel unsafe or inappropriate. This internalization creates a private emotional language, one that rarely translates easily into conversation. Explaining how something feels can seem impossible, not because it lacks clarity but because it has too many layers. Where would it even begin? So many don't. Instead, they become fluent in understanding others. They recognize patterns. They anticipate needs. They empathize without being asked. This sensitivity turned inward becomes outward awareness. And slowly, their emotional energy moves away from self-expression and toward emotional monitoring. This is often praised. They are described as mature, stable, strong, reliable. People lean on them, unaware that emotional labor is happening silently in the background. Being the calm one becomes both a role and a responsibility. A role that leaves little room for messiness. A responsibility that discourages visible struggle. Because once someone is seen as composed, showing vulnerability can feel like a disruption. So the silence deepens. What remains unseen is the cost of constant inner processing. Feeling deeply requires energy. Holding it inside requires more. When emotions are not expressed, they do not disappear. They circulate. They replay. They wait for resolution that never fully comes. This can create a sense of quiet fatigue. Not burnout in the dramatic sense, but a low, persistent tiredness that comes from carrying more than is acknowledged. Being emotionally present without emotional release. Yet despite this weight, many silent feelers resist the idea that something is wrong. Their inner world, though intense, is also rich. They experience nuance. Beauty lands deeply. Connection, when it feels safe, is profound. Silence is not only a burden, it is also a sanctuary. It protects them from chaos. It gives them space to think. It allows meaning to form. The problem is not sensitivity, and it is not silence. The problem begins when silence becomes the only place emotions are allowed to exist. This first layer, this quiet sensitivity, is not about pathology. It is about recognition. About seeing that some people live emotionally inward, not because they are disconnected, but because their connection runs deep. And depth, when unrecognized, often learns to stay quiet. Silence rarely appears without a reason. For those who feel deeply yet speak softly, quiet often began as an answer to something unspoken. Not a single moment, but a pattern. A slow understanding formed early. Expression did not always lead to comfort. Sometimes it led to distance. Sometimes confusion. Sometimes disapproval disguised as concern. In many childhood environments, emotions were allowed, but only certain ones and only in certain amounts. Happiness was welcomed if it stayed polite. Sadness was tolerated if it resolved quickly. Anger was often discouraged altogether. The message was subtle, rarely explicit, but consistently felt. Some emotions are easier to love than others. For a sensitive child, this inconsistency is powerful. They notice when caregivers shift tone after an emotional display. They feel the pause in response. They register when their intensity creates discomfort even if no one names it. Slowly, expression becomes something to monitor, something to manage. So they begin adjusting. They soften reactions. They shorten explanations. They hold tears until they are alone. Not because they are told to, but because the environment rewards containment. Approval comes easier when emotions are controlled. Connection feels safer when needs are minimized. This is not emotional neglect in the dramatic sense. Often it is well-meaning. Caregivers who are overwhelmed themselves. Families that value strength, productivity, or emotional independence. Cultures where vulnerability is respected in theory, but uncomfortable in practice. The sensitive child adapts by becoming observant rather than expressive. They learn to read the room before speaking. They sense when now is not the time. They become skilled at waiting. And waiting becomes a habit. One that follows them quietly into adulthood. Over time, this internal holding becomes associated with being good, easy, mature, low maintenance. Praise reinforces the pattern. Silence is no longer just safe, it is rewarded. But inside, something important happens. When emotions are consistently self-contained, the nervous system learns that regulation must happen alone. Comfort becomes internalized. Self-soothing replaces shared soothing. The body learns to down-regulate without external support, even when support would be appropriate. This creates independence, but also isolation. The person grows capable but also private. Strong but unseen. They become excellent at managing emotions but less practiced at sharing them. Emotional needs still exist but they feel inconvenient, or excessive, or unclear. So the needs go unnamed. In some cases, silence forms around moments of emotional rupture. Times when expression was met with dismissal, mockery, or misunderstanding. When vulnerability was met with logic instead of empathy. When pain was minimized or reframed too quickly. For a sensitive nervous system, these moments linger. They teach caution. They teach that clarity does not always lead to closeness. Sometimes it leads to disconnection. So silence becomes an act of preservation. It protects relationships. It protects self-image. It protects against the risk of being misunderstood. And importantly, it protects the inner world itself. When something is deeply felt, exposing it can feel like handing something fragile to someone who may not know how to hold it. This is where many silent feelers develop an unspoken rule. Only share what can survive misinterpretation. Everything else stays inside. As years pass, this pattern blends into personality. The quiet one, the thoughtful one, the emotionally steady one. Others may assume they do not struggle because they do not see struggle expressed. But what is unseen continues to be felt. The emotional system remains active, alert, responsive. It just operates internally. Without external mirroring, emotions take longer to settle. They recycle through thought. They search for meaning instead of release. This is not weakness. It is adaptation. Silence in this sense is intelligent. It forms in response to environment, not deficiency. It allows a sensitive person to stay connected in systems that are not built for depth. But adaptation has a cost. When silence becomes the default, it can become difficult to recognize when expression is actually safe. The body remains cautious even in secure relationships. Emotional sharing feels foreign, exposed, or oddly risky, even when logic says otherwise. And so, silence persists long after the original need for it has passed. Understanding where silence began is not about blame. It is about context. About seeing that this quietness was learned, not inherent. Shaped, not chosen. And once its origins are understood, the silence no longer feels like a mystery. It becomes a story, one rooted in protection, not absence. There is a quiet conflict that lives inside those who feel too much in silence. It is not a dramatic battle. It is a slow, continuous tension between what is felt and what is shown. On one side there is depth, rich, complex, emotionally responsive. On the other, restraint, careful, measured, protective. The nervous system holds both at once, feeling fully while containing completely. Psychologically, this creates a unique form of strain. Emotion by design seeks movement. It wants to be processed through expression, connection, or meaning-making. When expression is limited, the system compensates by increasing internal processing. Thoughts circle emotions, memories replay, sensations linger. The mind becomes the stage where everything happens. This is why many silent feelers experience heightened introspection. Their awareness turns inward because that is where emotion is allowed to exist. They analyze tone. They revisit conversations. They imagine alternative responses, not to change the past, but to complete an emotional loop that never closed. This internal looping is not overthinking in the shallow sense. It is unfinished emotional processing. Neurologically, suppressed expression keeps the nervous system in a state of mild activation. Not panic, not collapse, but alertness. The body remains ready to respond, yet rarely does. This creates subtle exhaustion, a background hum of tension that never fully resolves. Outwardly, they appear regulated. Inwardly, they are constantly regulating. This effort often goes unnoticed even by the person themselves. Because the skill developed early. Self-control feels natural. Emotional management feels automatic. There is pride in being low reactive, even when reactivity still exists internally. But something else forms alongside this control. Loneliness. Not the absence of people, but the absence of being known at depth. When emotions are felt privately, they lack external validation. There is no mirror saying that makes sense. No shared space where feeling can soften through connection. Everything must be understood alone. Over time, this creates a strange contradiction, being deeply empathetic toward others while feeling unseen oneself. Holding space easily while struggling to occupy space. This can lead to identity confusion. Am I actually sensitive, or just overreacting internally? If no one sees this depth, does it really exist? If strength is all that's visible, where does vulnerability belong? These questions remain unspoken, but they shape self-perception. The person begins to doubt their own emotional reality because it has never been fully reflected back to them. Resistance also develops here. A resistance to sharing. A resistance to needing. A resistance to vulnerability that feels like exposure rather than relief. Even when opportunities for closeness appear, the body hesitates. Expression feels risky not because of current danger but because the nervous system remembers past costs. The silence has worked before. Why disrupt it now? So emotions continue to be managed internally. Relationships remain emotionally functional but not fully revealing. Depth is present but contained. This inner conflict can manifest physically. Tightness in the chest, clenched jaw, shallow breathing, difficulty relaxing even in safe environments. The body carries what the voice does not. And yet, there is also attachment to this inner world. Letting go of silence can feel like losing control. The depth inside feels private, even sacred. Sharing it risks dilution, misunderstanding, oversimplification. So the conflict persists, wanting to be known but fearing the cost of being seen. Psychology does not frame this as dysfunction. It is a pattern of adaptation. A system optimized for survival in emotionally inconsistent environments. It is effective, but not without consequence. The consequence is not emotional numbness. It is emotional solitude. And solitude, when prolonged, becomes heavy. Still, within this conflict, something important begins to shift. Awareness. A subtle noticing that containment has limits. That silence, while protective, also restricts. This noticing is not a demand for change. It is the beginning of recognition. And recognition is where conflict softens, just enough to make space for something new. There comes a moment, often quiet, often unremarkable, when the inner tension begins to loosen. Not because the emotions have faded, but because they are finally seen as valid. For those who feel too much in silence, this shift is not dramatic. There is no sudden expression, no emotional breakthrough that spills outward. Instead, there is a gentle reorientation. A soft understanding that depth is not a problem to solve, but a reality to live with. The first realization is subtle. Nothing is wrong with this sensitivity. What once felt like excess begins to feel like information. The emotions have always been accurate. They were never asking to be eliminated, only acknowledged. This recognition alone changes the relationship with the inner world. Silence begins to feel less compulsory. Not every feeling needs translation. Not every emotion requires sharing. But silence is no longer the only place emotions are allowed to exist. There is room now for choice. This is where integration begins. Integration does not mean becoming expressive in ways that feel unnatural. It does not require becoming louder, more open, or more visible. It simply allows sensitivity to exist without shame, without constant management. The nervous system, once always alert, begins to trust its own signals. Emotional reactions are no longer questioned immediately. They are noticed, allowed, felt without urgency. This reduces internal strain. When emotions are permitted internally, they settle more easily. They move instead of circling. The body no longer has to hold everything at once. Regulation becomes less effortful, more organic. Connection also changes here. Instead of sharing everything or nothing, there is selective presence. Depth is offered where it feels safe. Silence remains where it feels protective, but not obligatory. Relationships become spaces of discernment rather than endurance. This often brings an unexpected realization. Being understood by everyone was never necessary. Being understood by a few, or even by oneself, is enough. Strength is redefined. Not as emotional containment, but as emotional honesty, internal honesty. There is courage in acknowledging what is felt, even if it remains unspoken. There is resilience in allowing emotion to pass through without immediately controlling it. There is integrity in honoring depth without demanding that others fully grasp it. The silent feeler does not lose their quiet nature here. They do not become someone else. They simply stop disappearing inside themselves. This allows presence to deepen. Moments are experienced more fully because they are no longer filtered through constant self-monitoring. Joy expands without fear of excess. Sadness softens without self-judgment. Emotional life becomes less about endurance and more about flow. Silence, in this integrated state, becomes intentional. It is no longer a shield. It is a space where meaning forms, a space where emotions can rest, a space that belongs to the individual, not to their past. In the end, the psychology of those who feel too much in silence is not a story of damage. It is a story of depth navigating a world that does not always know how to hold it. Some people feel loudly. Some feel quietly. Both are complete ways of being human. And for those who have learned to feel in silence, there is a quiet truth waiting beneath the years of containment. You were never too much. You were simply deep, in a world that often confuses depth for noise.